Okay, my name is Tim Carter, and this is another KOINE University broadcast. Of course, again, university being that which is achieved as we study. We all study the same text. It has the same grammar, syntax, context, etymology, root words, prefixes, suffixes. So, speaking of KOINE Christianity, KOINE University, that is someone who seriously studies KOINE and is honest in our pursuits of it, we will definitely grow in our university. So as the Assembly of Christ here in Jacksonville, where I pastor, and the consistency in remaining as adherents to the text, that is following it, yielding to the original meanings, our university is unsurpassed in the history of our church. In a 65-year history, we've never had such a university, and that's not simply a state of mind of unity, it's a state of our discipleship. It is the full-grown measure of the stature of Christ, being conformed to the image of the Son of God. And in 65-year history, that should be expected, it should be normal for an assembly with that length of history. So today, I'll just speak for a few moments about what does it mean when we talk about sectarianism, and that's an interesting word. It seems to be the byword today in all the types of violence in our world, and disappointingly so, that word there. And it comes from a word, A-I-R-E-S-E-I, and then a final form, S, has a diacritical above it. Heresies. We would call it simply heresies. And it's in its innocent form, I should say, that is without negative connotation. Positively speaking, it simply refers to a choice or preference, and I'll stay with the word preference. And for example, the Pharisees and Sadducees practiced this sectarianism. But what are these things? What would we call a preference, and how honest are we prepared to be when we talk about things we prefer? And you know that people like to slander others. Everyone else is the heretic, which that itself is charming. But for example, a conceptual, let's just go ahead and write this out, a conceptual mental construct, if you will, fancy way of describing something. I don't mean to say define. And then let's just say, for example, these are fallible. These are fallible. And then again, these are things we prefer. So that makes them heresy. We prefer these things. So this is where someone, for example, was quoted as having said, after he spent a great deal of time and investment in a particular eschatological theory that he was developing about rapturism, and he said he might be wrong. Well, as commendable as saying he might be wrong, which he was saying his conceptual mental construct was fallible, he didn't take the responsibility to speak of those elements that were fallible. And we all know, as KOINE Christians, common Christians, share the common faith, the common salvation, that we only assert one text, that is the Bible itself, to be infallible. We don't assert conceptual mental constructs. So, for example, as I was saying, someone prefers a particular conceptual mental construct as it pertains to rapture theories. Now, you pick any one you want, just be able to explain it and explain the fallible elements of it, or show yourself to just be a perpetrator of your own cognitive bias and the result of priming. We're all primed. We are involved in the process of priming, whether it be our culture, social priming, cultural priming, religious priming, political priming. For example, the seminary I attended expected us to come from backgrounds where we had well-developed conceptual mental constructs, well-developed preferences, and these constructs around rapture theories. They expected us to come from, for example, that is, not all of us came from a New Testament church, as we call it, in a very practical way. So they would expect us to come in, for example, with a Calvinism, that is, those of us who came in from the outside, for example. But, of course, it's difficult to find someone that's competent and capable enough to teach you the fallible elements of this, or heresy of what people call Arminianism. Now, I have no idea. It all depends on which person you speak to and their knowledge. Several times people just speak, it's just talk. That is, it doesn't reflect a body of material that has built up over the centuries, perhaps, if some of these are that old. And they are not willing or capable of pointing out the fallible elements of it. Fallible elements. Now, what makes these so attractive, and we all know this, honestly speaking, that is, ease of entry, instant expertise, so to speak, no seminary required, no Sunday school required, no length of study and time required. Just pick up your rapture theory that you've been primed according to maybe your favorite teacher. Maybe you come from a particular part of the country, let's say just the United States, where it's popular. The mid-trib is popular in your part of the area and the churches there, or you went to a particular school, maybe in your church or local there, or maybe you were from a pre-trib primed and you come out, but you may have forgotten because emotionally you become so biased towards your view that you forget that it's fallible, or you forget to take the responsibility to express that. And again, this is what's so striking about it. So when you study KOINE, what does the text say? Well, what's one thing that can make rapture theories, heresy, preferences, conceptual mental constructs that we've been primed to accept, what can make them, what's one of the fallible elements? Well, just one for this one. We know in the KOINE text that the resurrection and the raising, seizing, that is, the seizing of the ones who are alive, the resurrection of those who are dead in Christ, and then the seizing of those is together with and also simultaneously. So if you have a rapture theory that depends upon the ability to rearrange the order of the return of Christ, then the resurrecting, the raising of the dead, and then those that are alive and left around being seized away together with those who are raised, and that being simultaneous, then you probably have a flaw there, and that would be a fallible element indeed. But cognitive bias and emotional, affective bias can be something, if you're not careful, you'll prefer it. But I would enjoy hearing someone teach any particular perspective on this, that they studied themselves, they developed themselves. Today it's popular for men to appropriate these particular things that were already developed for them and just say, oh, I'm a Calvinist. But they couldn't even begin to show you in the Bible, according to the text, the grammar, the etymology, the syntax, the context, even in English, much less in a common, simple, wordy document like the KOINE text, New Testament. someone could just pop up and say, well, I'm Arminian, and they were primed and told how horrible these Calvinists were and how horrible a pre-trib rapturist was, or whatever they're told, in whatever direction this stuff can go. It's laughable only because in the United States we have freedom of speech, we have rule of law, and we do find ourselves protected. Disappointing, though, is how few people want the responsibility to teach the text, and that is, all Christians want to. All Christians will prefer infallible. So, my heresy, for example, to add to this list, and it's the lowest form of heresy there is KOINE text. And of course, it's infallible. And you say, well, what about the infallible elements of doctrines about the rapture? Well, if they're infallible elements, then you don't need them to be part of the rapture theories. You can take that out and put it back where it belongs, which is in the Bible. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. That's not Calvinism. That's not Arminianism. That's the Hebrew text. So we don't need a word for it if it's the Bible, for example. So if you take the infallible aspects of this out, then it's no longer Calvinism you're talking about the Bible. And if you take the infallible aspects of this out, it's the Bible. It's no longer Arminianism. And that's why we didn't brand the Bible with one of these conceptual mental construct names or labels. These are brands and products. They're proffered and they're promoted and advertised and they're pushed very aggressively. It's quite an economic machine out there. And then when you say, well, here, if everyone's so interested in the truth, 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 then here you go, here's the truth, take it, and let's all study it together, and you get your lexicon and I'll get mine, and we'll meet at the river, so to speak. But now that's work, and that doesn't make anyone special, and that doesn't have an ease of entry into this labor. For to labor in word and doctrine is toil, and it requires tools, it requires time, and the person to be developed spiritually and have to yield to the text and abandon perhaps primers from this and primers from that, especially today. This is the new kid on the block, and it's real disappointing to see people how easily one can enter into this. You can become an instant expert. For example, today people become instant experts and throw phrases around like free will, not knowing that this is a compatibilistic philosophy that has now been adopted to explain free will in this camp. This one's a libertarian philosophy or tradition that's associated with their term free will, but neither speak of what the Bible actually says. Genesis 15:6 says Abraham believed God, caused himself to believe God. Abraham caused himself to believe God, so that's agent causation. Well, neither of these conceptual mental constructs promote that. And of course, if you were to advocate that, then it would take away one of the largest. If you took compatibilism away from Calvinism, you've made it void of a great element, very fallible, by the way. So everyone knows this. It's just difficult to find people who can divest themselves of self and give up what we prefer. And someone asked me, they said, well, what do you believe about the rapture? I said, harpazo, seizing away. And then I went on and explained that occurs when the dead in Christ are raised, then we which are alive and left around will be seized away together with them simultaneously. Well, that really wasn't what I believed. That's what the KOINE text says. So again, we're called to believe the text. And again, in Calvinism and other fallible, in both of these, they'll both argue about different versions of sovereignty of God, but they won't distinguish between boule, determination, and the lema, desire. God has things, there's things God determines, there's things God desires, and they're very distinguished in the Bible. But again, that is not to the interest of these conceptual mental constructs. It doesn't advance them to resolve these matters. And of course, the KOINE text resolves it, but it diminishes the proponents of these all become, for example, if you were to take proponents and put us in our rightful place, we would all be under this. And we'd all be advocating this. That's why I said our university is watching and discipling people and watching them come under this text, and then we all support it. We begin to hold it up, and we hold this text up. And with today's knowledge and education we have, and the computers we have, and knowing that we still have seminaries that are neither, they're not this, they're not this, and they certainly don't advocate the horrible things people say about each other about this, you'll find that there is a reality today, just as in Christ's time. People are still being called out to come out from among them. And that's what we do at KOINE University. We still find ourselves upholding this text and not using it to uphold any of these traditions and conceptual mental constructs. So that's enough for today. That's a lot. My goodness. You can wear yourself out. That's not what this university is about. Our university is about building each other up. So enjoy this.